Awesome! You know how to make fantastic visualizations. Now that you're an expert, it's your job to make sure visualizations you create aren't only well coded and gorgeous, they have to solve a problem as well. As coders, we often get wrapped up in perfect technical execution. We want our code to look good, work in all browsers, load quickly, be readable by our future self even 2 years from now, and God forbid someone runs a linter on the code and puts us to shame. You do have a JavaScript linter running in your editor, don't you? But we forget about the why. Why are we doing this? Why did somebody ask us to visualize this particular data? Why did the designer want this or that look to our color scheme? You've gone through this course, you know more about data visualization than anyone else on the team. I can almost promise that you do. As an expert, you should know the why as well as the what. Don't be just a code monkey. After weeks of research, I've distilled my hand-wavy approach down to 4 basic questions. Doing this, I leaned heavily on a presentation by Chris W., the lead data science. First, you have to know why you're making a visualization. Sure, they're fun, especially if you're a nerd like me. There's nothing like immersing yourself in some data, finding a snazzy new way of displaying it, and reveling in your magnificent creation when you emerge from the coding cave. But your audience doesn't care about how much fun you had, and your visualization is for them, not you. And just between you and me, they usually want to learn a new insight about something interesting or useful. Once you know why you're making a visualization, you have to know who for. Now this might seem backwards. After all, how are you supposed to know why your audience cares if you don't even know who they are? And it's true to an extent. Different audiences will have different reasons for caring. But the last question was a head fake, as Randy Posh would call it. You should check him out, by the way. His last lecture was brilliant. Anyway, the previous question secretly highlighted why is your data interesting, or what there is to learn, regardless of who is looking at it. I find that thinking about the who muddles the why. But once you know who is your audience, you can think about styling, about appropriate presentation, about the general approach. You wouldn't bore a middle schooler with nitty-gritty details, and you wouldn't offend a statistician by mistaking a median for an average. Those things matter. Great. Now that you know why you're making a visualization and for whom, it's time to think about the data you have to work with. The kind of data you've got is going to dictate the kind of visualization you can make, obviously. Less obviously, it dictates the kind of visualization you should make. HubSpot released a great set of slides about the basics of matching data types to chart types. I'd sum it up as: lines are for trends, bars are for qualitative comparisons, maps are for maps, scatter plots discover trends, and pie charts are usually the wrong choice. Now, of course, there's more to it than that. Whole books have been written about this stuff, and you should check them out. And never be afraid to get new data if you need it. Sometimes what we have isn't enough to fulfill the why and the who. We did a lot of this throughout the course. The last question you should ask yourself is, what do you want? You know the kind of data you have to work with, you know who is your audience, and you know why they care. But it's important to have a personal goal as well. Usually when I think about this question, I change it a bit. Instead of what do I want, I ask myself, what is the one thing I want to change? If there's just one takeaway that my audience is going to have, just one thing they keep in mind after they leave, the one thing they change about their life or their thought process or whatever, what is it? This gives me focus and makes sure I don't try to pack too much into too little. It doesn't always work, but it's a good aspiration to have. For example, the one thing I want to achieve with this video is for you to think like an expert, not just a shiny things maker. Now I hope you don't think I'm full of talk just because the main example we worked on through the course was kind of a mess. It was semi-carefully chosen as a teaching tool because my audience wanted to learn D3.js, so you cared because you wanted to learn how to make shiny things. You were my audience. Because you wanted to learn, we had to include everything in the kitchen sink. The visualization had to do just about everything possible. The data itself didn't really matter. I chose the UFO sightings because it's an inherently interesting data set. Long history fuels every kid's imagination, and I'm sure every adult secretly longs for the chance to say, "Hey, I saw something weird last night," to their friends. Admit it, we're all nerds here. And finally, I wanted to make something that looks good, is fun to make, and highlights an interesting fact despite being a teaching tool. As it turns out, most sightings happen near Navy and airspace bases. My point is that you should think about the why, not just the what. Your audience will love you for it. In the next video, we're going to look at a few simple ways of going from meh to wow.